All right, so this is going to be chapter 21, Notes for the Muslim Empires. It's a fairly short chapter compared to some of the others, and there's not a whole lot of information you need, so this should be pretty quick and easy for you to get taken care of. So we see it begins with the Muslim unity being destroyed. Early on, you have, right after the foundation of Islam, you have the Abbasid dynasty, which is a really powerful one, which we'll talk about. But then once the Mongols are gone out of the picture after they disintegrate, there's a new unity that's brought by the Turkic peoples. So Turkic coming from Turkey. So what we see here is this is Anatolia, which is modern day Turkey, and we have the Ottoman Empire on this side, which I call it like an Oreo cookie. This is one side of the cookie. And you have the cream filling, which is the Safavid Empire, and then you have the other cookie, which is the Mughal. The reason I say these are cookies is because cookies take a lot of ingredients. They take eggs, milk, flour, and so on. And so you have a lot of different people and cultures and religions living in this region in the Ottoman Empire, like Christianity and Judaism religiously. And then in the Mughal Empire, you have Hindus, a majority, the dominant population. So you have to have a mixture. You have to have some kind of tolerance and diversity. Whereas in the Safavid, it's fairly uniform. There's not a lot of diversity. It's mostly Shia Islam. So the Ottomans come out of Turkey, and in 1453 they capture Constantinople, which ends the Byzantine Empire, which we'll talk about the Byzantine Empire. And so they become really powerful. They are a warrior class. You can see it's the section in your book called "The State Geared to Warfare." A big thing there is they're called Gunpowder Empires. These three are called Gunpowder Empires because they used artillery. And we're going to watch a really cool video about the Ottoman. Actually, I'll put it on my website too, about how the Ottomans were able to conquer Constantinople, called the City of Walls, which nobody had ever been able to conquer until gunpowder, the Gunpowder Empires. So the sultans were very, very powerful. If you think about Aladdin, the sultan there, Jasmine's dad, and he had Jafar, who was his advisor, also called a vizier. So they have a very important bureaucracy. But in the Ottomans also, you see Muslim, Christian, and Jewish merchants are important. You also have scholars that are included. So they have a lot of diversity and tolerance. So they restore Constantinople. Constantinople was at this whenever it was conquered was probably the most important city, at least in the West, for the West, because it was a crossroads from Asia into Europe. It was the Islamic world, the Christian world, the Asian world. So it was a massive, important city, and they restored it. There was a big church there that we'll see Justinian, one of the Byzantine emperors, builds called Hagia Sophia, and it gets turned into a mosque, which it is today. So it's a major commercial center. So they have a lot of cultural flowering. So in the intellectual side of your Persian chart, if you make one for this chapter, they have a big artistic legacy. You can see they have a lot of contributions. But the problem is they didn't actually decline. We saw this with World War One. They at the end of World War One is when the Ottoman actually ended. So 1918, and we're talking about they started in 1453. So they had this long, slow decline, which is why they were called the sick man of Europe for so long, because they were on a decline. The empire gets too big and it's too expensive. The bureaucracy is corrupt. The peasants are oppressed. The rulers are weak and useless. And so the Janissaries, if you remember the Janissaries, they were the Christian slaves who were taken and made into warriors. They blocked any reforms, and then that means Europe starts to creep in. And that's where our essential question for the chapter comes in, is what role did the West play in the decline of the empires? Well, in this case, the Ottomans were already weak internally, and then they weren't making any sort of military reforms to fight back against the Europeans, and so the external problem started. And then this Battle of Lepanto is very, 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 very important. Write down the Battle of Lepanto, and that's when the Turks lost control of the Eastern Mediterranean, thereby allowing Europeans to start to dominate. The Portuguese navy also was very powerful, and this is why we see them taking the lead early on, as we'll see later on. They take the lead early on and establish ports in India, and really get a stranglehold on that. They take the lead. So there's no innovation. Remember, if you look back at some of the previous chapters, like with the decolonization period, the Tanzimat reforms. Remember the Tanzimat reforms. If you don't remember it, look it up. Tanzimat, Tanzimat reforms. It's an interesting way that they adapted to the Western power. So look at that compared to what happens with the Ottomans. Do a little comparison there. So the Shia challenge. So these are Shiite Muslims. You have Sunni Muslims and you have Shiite Muslims, and the Safavids were Shiite, and so they were rather uniform in that region. And this would be like modern day Iran. There's not a whole lot to know about the Safavids other than the fact that they were pretty uniform in their religion, and so therefore they didn't have a lot of diversity that they needed to promote. Now look in your book. In this section, there's something called In-Depth, the Gunpowder Empires. Look at that. We're going to be looking at the Gunpowder Empires more in depth later on. You really need to look at this because it also discusses how the Chinese scholar gentry and the shogun, we can make some comparison there. So with the Safavid, Abbas I is the main one that you need to know, and it was under his rule that the empire reached its height, its zenith. They adopted the Persian tradition because that's where the Persian Empire used to be, and that's where we see things like the veil begin. Because the elite Persian culture, women would wear a veil, and that's where we see this come along. But it's dedicated to Islamic culture, and Abbas I tries to make his empire a center of Islamic culture as well as of trade. Of course, Constantinople surpasses it. Then do this comparison here. Do a T-chart, an Ottoman and Safavid comparison. It says they both have much in common. Like what? Go through this little section here in the notes or go through the section in your book and do a comparison and contrasting between the Ottoman and Safavid because they do have some comparisons. They're both Muslim, but they have different views and they have some things that are the same. So do that. Make your own T-chart to compare. And then the Safavid kind of arose and fell rather quickly. Abbas had no heirs. There was internal problems and foreign invasions, so it only lasted a couple hundred years and it was gone. Then the Mughals are the next one we see. Really, the cookie ends are the ones that we pay attention to the most because the Mughals says the apex of Muslim civilization in India. The apex is the height, the pinnacle, the top. And so Babur is this invader. Osman was the Ottoman invader way up here. Osman was the Ottoman Empire founder. Babur was the Mughal Empire founder. Now, always remember, Mughal. Cows are sacred in India. Cows say moo. Mughals ruled India. India is Hindu. So initially when they invaded, they wanted booty, not conquest. Haha, no, they didn't want that kind of booty. They wanted treasure. So they had technology like the Ottomans, Gunpowder Empire, so they were able to conquer a lot of the subcontinent. And then Akbar is a successor eventually to Babur, and he becomes emperor at 13, 14 years old, and he is known as Akbar the Great, and that's not a title that people often give easily. So he tried to make a reconciliation with the Hindus. He was Muslim, his ruling family was Muslim, and the subjects were Hindu. So he looked through this little section. There's a lot of things he tried to do to make it to where the Hindus and Muslims could live peacefully together. He also tried to make changes that would benefit all the people, whether they're Hindu or Muslim. So things like he regulated the consumption of alcohol. He tried to improve the position of women. He encouraged when a husband would die, he would try to encourage the widow to remarry, as opposed to what this thing is. Look up sati. I'm not going to tell you here. Look up sati, or wait until you see later in the video. This is a very interesting cultural practice. He tried to prohibit it because otherwise, that way the widows could remarry. He tried to discourage children from being married. He had market days so that women could go and shop in public on their own, so more freedom outside the home. He also tried to create a new religion, which you'll see further on. It's called Din Ilahi, where he wanted to make a syncretic blend, Syncretic, syncretic, blending of faiths. You need to know that word, syncretic, which is why I said it and spelled it. Sync, S-Y-N-C, like what you do with your mobile device, plug it into your computer. You have to sync, or you have to sync your photos. So they're trying to bring one thing together to another. And in this case, Akbar was trying to create a religion. In fact, Allahu Akbar is a phrase that we hear a lot from the Islamic religion. God is great. But it could also possibly be translated as Akbar is God. So it's very interesting. He was a very mystical kind of guy when it comes to religion. Then we see further down the Mughal era, Jahangir, he's okay, he was tolerant, but then Shah Jahan is the one that you probably know without even knowing you know, because he's the one that built the Taj Mahal, which was a mausoleum, a burial place for his wife, Mumtaz Mahal. So at court and the life of elite ordinary women, basically at court, life for women improved, but elsewhere it declined. After Akbar, child marriage grew, widow remarriage died out, and so on. So the empire started to decline and die, and then get to the global connections and look at the Gunpowder Empires, and you can see the problems that they had internally as well as externally, and how that went for their restoration of the bridge. So next, I'm going to do this. You can pause. I have like 8 seconds. So look at those highlighted terms, highlighted term, highlighted terms, highlighted term,